Okay, what's up, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of the Pilipinx-American Stories podcast. I'm your host, Alfredo. We here at the podcast are here to better understand aspects of the Filipinx-American diaspora. We cover topics such as, but not limited to, history, community, and Filipinx-American culture. So today is another solo episode, and I am going to be addressing a question that was asked to me in the past, and I wanted to address this now because I finally have a platform to talk about it because I wasn't able to do so in the past. So, the question that I got was, what was it like to put together two books? So, as of right now, the current books that I have out is Representation Over Pure Visibility, Stories of Filipinx Americans in San Diego, and Stories of Pilipinx Americans Understanding the Process. So, the way I'm going to talk about this a little bit is I'm going to go from the easiest aspects of putting those pieces of content together, and then I'm going to go into aspects that are a little bit more difficult, and then I'll go into the most difficult part of putting it together. So, the first point that I wanted to touch was choosing self-publishing over choosing a publisher. So it kind of just happened, to be honest. I had a friend that was, or I had a friend that previously published two books before I even published mine, and then I just asked her what kind of publishers she used, and she was telling me that she used CreateSpace, which is now Kindle Direct Publishing, which is owned by Amazon, and it felt like it was the easiest way to go. I did my research on it a little bit. I'm just like, oh, okay, this is something that's pretty simple. The user interface is pretty good and everything. So that was one of the first options that I went to. In terms of choosing a publisher, I really didn't do as much research as I wanted to with it. I couldn't find too many companies or publishing companies that align with my mission and vision. So with the whole self-publishing thing, it kind of just fell into my lap because one, I wanted a little bit more control over it. I want to do like all the marketing behind it and just everything that it takes to just put a project out. I just wanted to handle it myself. And that goes for both books. The first one was really more of a struggle trying to figure out which is the best, and the second one was more so based off of my experience from the first, and it was just the easiest route to go on. And I'm not sure if I'm going to continue using the same publisher or whatever. I might have to do a little bit more research on different self-publishing companies, but this one was definitely the easiest one that I chose during the time of publishing the first two books. And the second topic I wanted to bring up was the process of actually putting it together. So I'm breaking this down into actually like transcribing and like interviewing and stuff, and then the project concepts, which is the harder of the two. So I'm gonna go with just the transcribing and interviewing. So interviewing part was super easy. First one was more of a test run, so to speak. I had questions laid out and everything, and I had a lot of amazing people that I interviewed. Shout out to y'all if you're listening to this right now, if you were interviewed in it. The interviews were super smooth and everything. I enjoyed every single one of them. Every single one was very heartfelt, and I still remember a lot of these conversations to this day. The vibe was amazing, and I feel like I was able to just bounce off what everyone was talking about, and just I felt like I was very engaged in all of it. So that was probably like one of my favorite parts of like putting it together. Like the interview process was like the most raw part of this project, if for better use of the term and everything. But yeah, it was most likely my favorite part out of all of it. I don't know if it's going to be the same for future projects, but so far it's been just amazing being able to interview and just have conversations with like these people that I've known for years and everything. In terms of transcribing, it was more difficult during the first book just because just a little behind the scenes and everything. I kind of left the transcribing portion to the last few months before I actually published the book. So that was more so a stressor that I was putting on myself, and I was kind of procrastinating, but I learned from that. It was kind of difficult to transcribe all of those within one go. I wanted to do this myself. I know I could have used like a software or something, but I also wanted to relive those conversations, so that's why I also chose to self transcribe everything. But yeah, so the first iteration of it, it was difficult just because timing was pretty bad. Because for one, it was my last year of university and everything. I was also helping plan a national conference, and I was also looking for a job. So it was kind of like that was just another added stressor onto everything. So I left it towards the last like few months, like I said, and I ended up having to push back that book, but I'm happy I did because who that putting that kind of stress on yourself to meet a deadline, especially if you're the one creating it, can be very damaging to your mental health if you're not like being aware of like what's going on in your head. So yeah, I was a big lesson learned from that first one. So with the second one, I learned my lesson really well. Instead of just leaving it until the last like few months or everything, I was more so transcribing as I went along. So after one interview, I would take the time to transcribe it, and that it would usually take about like time wise, it would take about an hour to two just to finish it, but I spread it out between like different days just so that I would have like some time off and everything. So this one was a little bit more chill, especially since during the last few interviews that I had to try to transcribe, they were during the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I had way more time to just transcribe and everything and just like edit everything as well. So again, that's another one. That's another thing I actually want to touch upon. So after the whole transcribing thing, it was the editing portion. So for the first book, that one again, I kind of left it to the last minute because of like a whole bunch of different things that were going on in my life during that time. And for the second one, again, it was super easy just to like edit everything. Like I actually finished transcribing things like I want to say like a month, maybe like a month and a half early, just because like a lot of the work that was being done was expedited and I didn't have as much like outside of the house work to take care of, so I spent more time actually transcribing and editing, the understanding the process and everything. So that was probably the smoothest project that I've had to date, and it sucks that the reason for it was, or the reason it was so easy was because of like a global pandemic and everything. But again, I didn't really have as much of a choice because I couldn't avoid it, or I did not want to avoid it, and I had more time and everything. So with the second one, it was a lot easier. The first one came with the lessons I was able to take on to the second, and that's how the final product came to be. It was like the final products were very different in terms of like how they came together, but at the end of the day, all of them were finished and everything. So I'm happy with the way they turned out. So the next bulk or the next point that I wanted to address was the project concept, because I wouldn't say it was the most difficult, but it was the aspect of both projects that changed throughout I want to say the year-long processes that it took to put these books together. So with representation over pure visibility, that book took about, I want to say, 10 months to actually put together. So the initial concept that I had was a, I guess, a rehash of this Twitter project that I had that I mentioned in the first episode, but it was a way to highlight different people within the San Diego community, and I wanted to choose people that were essentially putting in a lot of work in the Pilipinx-American community, but as it kind of went down the line, I wasn't sure how to properly define who was doing the work, because like you can't really just measure that out of like quantity. It's more so like quality and everything. So it was really hard to measure that because at first I wanted to have a lot of people that were doing or a lot of people that were like raking up numbers within the community, like, oh, they did this event or they did this number of events, they got these number of awards and everything. But that shifted because you can't really measure someone's quality of work by the amount of things that they do, but more so the impact of what they're able to do, regardless of how much time they have and everything. And that's basically how it shifted towards that. I was interviewing a lot of people at first that I was close to because these were people that brought me up and everything, and these were essentially the people I defined as that first definition. Like they had a lot of accolades, they've had a lot of events and everything. So I still went with that kind of thing, but how I was interviewing and why I was interviewing became very different considering how the definition or like the purpose of the project changed up and everything and changing up more into a more so quality based kind of interview. But with that change happening and everything, it sort of shifted, or not sort of, it shifted into more so interviewing people I was closer to and everything instead of getting like a mass amount of people to just contribute to this project. It was a lot of people that were mentoring me since I want to say since high school, since 2010. So it was a lot of like my mentors, a lot of people that I was looking up to in my time with the community, like during like the early days and everything. And with those like culmination of interviews, it ended up turning into this. Well, okay, backtracking a little bit. So this is going into the background and purpose aspect of the project. And when I realized who I was interviewing, it became more so a project that was dedicated to my mentors and the leaders I've been looking up to since I started community organizing back in 2010. So with this, the same kind of concept of like quality in the community and everything was being addressed, but I wanted to do it in the context of the people that were bringing me up. So it was kind of like this dual like sword kind of thing where I was fulfilling the need to interview and better understand like these people that I've been looking up to, but I also wanted to do this as a tribute to them because it's also a thing of thanks to them, like showing my appreciation, helping other people understand like why they're so important to my growth and why they're so important to community and everything. So with that, it shifted from this very like surface level kind of project to something that was a little bit more deeper, and I was able to invest a little bit more of myself into it. So yeah, that's essentially how it shifted. Again, it was a very surface level thing and then it became something a lot deeper. And I'm happy with how that turned out because if I went with this whole like raking up the numbers and seeing how many people I could interview for this, it probably would not have turned out the same way that I wanted it to, and the purpose would be completely different. So I'm happy with the way that turned out. So for the second one, stories of Filipinx Americans understanding the process. So the theme itself was a very apparent theme that was going on throughout my last year of college and everything. So the way I define the process is basically like your struggles and everything, the the journey it takes to get to that final goal and everything. So when you see like this iceberg theory, like I forget who's the one that created this, but with the iceberg theory and everything, you get to see everything on the surface level. You get to see the wins these people attain, these accolades, these awards, and everything, but you don't really see what goes on to get to that point unless you're like in it with them for like the long run and everything. So that was something that was addressed a lot in my last year of college and everything. Like it took a while for me to graduate, but the journey itself was the more important part because it was like a journey of self discovery, a journey of hardship, a journey of like lessons and everything. So that was something that I wanted to bring along for the second book. So with this one, I was sure that, or at first, I was sure that I had a lot more capacity to interview more people and everything. I had a pretty long list of people I wanted to interview. I just wanted to learn about like the nitty gritty of what it takes to finish all their projects or what it takes to get to the final step of their project and everything. So I had people lined up like Judy Travis from Miss Judy's Life, Jerome Ski from Massive Monkeys and everything. But that ended up shifting as the interviews continued. And again, sort of like with the same evolution from the first book, um, the interviews that I wanted to have at first were very surface level. I mean, I still wanted to get deeper within these other people's stories, but it became something that I eventually invested my like whole being into. So that's why the shift came about. So after interviewing the first two people, Chris Vito and Teresa Hodges, shout out to y'all if you're listening to this, I realized that I was choosing people that were, or people that had experience that were reflective of mine that were going on during this time. So when I started putting this book together officially, I was, or I'm still technically going through like my own post grad process and everything, but this was like early on in the stages where I was trying to just figure out what direction I was going in. So with these conversations, they were, for better use of the word, they were very healing because they fulfilled my own personal questions about how to navigate certain spaces and everything. So with Chris, that was more so like the sociological aspect of it, just better understanding and questioning things with the world. And that was, I was asking a lot of questions that I had about the world and everything and about what he was doing. So that kind of just melded together into that interview. With Teresa, that was something that was more so based on ethnic studies because that was originally what I wanted to go into post grad and everything, wanted to do teaching. So I wanted to hear what it was like from someone who is an ethnic studies professor and who's gone through academia, like trying to just navigate their way through and everything. And then with the third interview, this one was the one that changed the quality of it significantly. Shout out to Melissa Dow. She was the third interview. She's an amazing dancer and everything, amazing teacher. She was the one that helped shift the, essentially the tides of how this book was going. Um, Backtracking a little bit, after realizing that these interviews were more so reflective of what I was going on, that's the direction I started going to. So I started getting a lot more picky with who I wanted to interview because I did not want to interview someone that wasn't, that didn't go through something that I was going through during the time of that interview, or didn't go, isn't going through something that I previously went through. So for fast forwarding again, so Melissa Dow was the third interview. I was having a conversation with her about like her Bigo journey and everything, and then it ended up like post interview and everything. We were talking about like quality versus quantity in terms of things, and it just kind of put my mind to perspective because I essentially wanted 10 people to interview for this project, and then a question that she brought up was, why does it have to be 10? And I honestly did not have a solid answer as to why I wanted a 10. I kind of just felt like it was a magic number, but realistically that's not that good of a response to give because it doesn't really add on to the quality of it or anything. And I felt like this was the part that changed it up a little bit because again, I wanted exactly 10 because of like that magic number or whatever. And I was like, yeah, I really don't need 10 to make it quality or everything. So I just stick to the 7 people I interview and then writing my own story along with that. And then As time went along, quality got a lot better and everything. It was a lot easier for me to interview everyone else. Shout out to like all the people that I interviewed: Lauren, Christy, Jenna, Ria, all those people whose experiences mirrored like one aspect of my life and everything. And yeah, I was able to just with those interview like last few interviews, I was able to like dig a little deeper and everything because they were also reflective of what was I of yeah, my words today are really weird. So they were reflective of experiences that I was going through or have gone through already. So I was putting a lot more emphasis into the quality of it, and that's essentially how the final product of it came up. So at first it was something that was more so like quantity based or just more so surface level based like the first one, and then as time went along I started investing my own like personal self in it, and then these interviews became a lot more heartfelt, and just with everything it wrapped up into this nice little project. And I'm super proud of this one just because compared to both of the projects, as much as I love both of them, I felt like this one was the most heartfelt because I felt like I put a lot more heart and spirit into this one just because, like I said, this one is really reflective of like the processes that I was going through like during that I want to say 11-month span of like first like those first 11 months of postgrad and everything. So it was just this culmination of what I was going through, what I can ask other people and everything. So it was this chat back and forth of how I wanted to understand how to navigate, understanding what it was like for other people to navigate, and just like kind of also give myself a bit of a confidence boost, understanding that people have gone through these kinds of things before and have navigated like these kind of roads before. So I didn't feel as alone while I was doing it. And I'm hoping that was also the impact that other people got out of it. Even if it was just one person, that's what I hope that this project like came out and everything. So yeah, with these the most difficult parts were just the project concepts and everything because of how they evolved and every like how they evolved throughout the process of making these projects. And with the evolution and everything and the choices that I made along the way, I'm happy with the final products for both. And a last bit of advice before I end this podcast. I mentioned this before, so I went with the whole self-publishing versus publisher route. If you do ever choose to publish something, I suggest doing your research a little bit. Do you want to go self-publishing and have a little bit more control like I did? Do you want to handle more of the marketing, the web design, like all the cover art and everything like I did and everything? Or do you want to go with a publisher where you could just concentrate on writing? So with this, I went with more of the self-publishing route just because it was easier, and I'm happy because like I had control of everything, and that's kind of how everything went. And I was able to switch up the transcribing times, the editing times, and just the whole project itself. And I felt like if I chose with the publisher, I would have to stick to like the first initial concept and everything, and it probably wouldn't have turned out as good as these projects came out and everything. So again, just repeating, if you're choosing to like publish a book or publish a project and everything, weigh out your options, see what fits best for you. If you want to go with a more like in control self-publishing route, then go for it. If you want to go more so the publishing route of with another company, I suggest doing your research before you commit to one because that's a very long process to like handle. You have to work with a lot of deadlines, work with editors and things like that. So do your research on that before you commit to either one. Just go with whichever fits best, and then whatever vision you'll have for your project will come out depending on like which option you choose. That being said, thank y'all for listening to this stream of consciousness episode. Hope y'all enjoyed just like my little rant or just like my little retelling of how I put together two different books and everything. And yeah, if you have any more questions about like the process that I wasn't able to touch upon, or just any questions in general about like these projects, feel free to hit me up. At this time of the recording, I do now have a Twitter. So the Twitter is PilM Stories. I'm going to be putting it in the description in wherever this is going to be streamed at. I'm also going to be putting it on Instagram and everything. And make sure to follow us on Instagram, Pilipinx-American Stories. Stay tuned for updates coming on. Stay tuned for more projects and everything, and stay tuned for more episodes. And with that, thank you all for listening again, and we shall catch you on the next episode.